The banking system never sleeps. Even when all the employees go home, when the conversations in the hallways die down, when the lights go out in most offices, that's when my work begins. My name is Daniel Morgan, and I'm the Chief Systems Administrator at First National Bank. This night seemed just like the hundreds of other nights I've spent in an empty office building. I love this time, when the huge banking machine slows down, goes into maintenance mode, and I can get into the heart of it unobstructed to make sure everything is working as it should. It was a Tuesday, the middle of April. Rain drummed on the windows of the 32nd floor where our IT department was located. I sat alone in a large room filled with workstations. Only the light of my monitor and the muted hum of the server room broke the silence. "Good evening, Mr. Morgan," I heard from the door. It was James, one of the night guards, making his usual rounds. "Hey, James, just you and me as usual?" He nodded. "And Frank on the first floor, too. Late again?" I smiled. "Nightly system checks. Security update tonight. Need to make sure everything goes smoothly." "I understand. Good luck to you." James left and I returned to my monitors. The banking system management console was open in front of me, my personal window into the digital world where billions of dollars move every day. The scheduled upgrade was due to begin in an hour, and I needed to do a preliminary check to make sure all components were ready to migrate to the new version. I started by checking the major nodes of the network. This is a routine procedure that I have performed hundreds of times, consistently analyzing the status of all key servers, routers, firewalls. Like a doctor listening to a patient's heartbeat, I listened to the rhythm of our network, looking for the slightest abnormalities. On the 12th server, I noticed something strange, a slight anomaly in network traffic. Nothing critical, just unusual activity at a time when most systems should be nearly dormant. I paused, frowned, and decided to dig deeper. My fingers ran quickly across the keyboard, opening one window after another, tracing the source of the unusual activity. What I discovered over the next 10 minutes made me go cold. Hidden in the depths of the system, disguised as standard maintenance programs, lurked several Trojans. They were so skillfully integrated into our system that they would never have caught my eye on a routine scan. I only found them because I knew every corner of our network like the back of my hand. These programs weren't active yet, but all indications were that they were programmed to activate today during the system upgrade, when many of the defense mechanisms would be temporarily disabled. "Damn it," I whispered, leaning back in my chair. This wasn't just a random attack. Someone knew our technical schedule well. Someone understood our system architecture. This was a carefully planned hacker attack, aimed to hit us at our most vulnerable moment. I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed the number of Emily Chen, my deputy and the only person whose technical skills I trusted as much as my own. After 4 beeps, she answered. Her voice sounded hoarse and weak. "Daniel, do you know what time it is?" "Emily, we have a problem. I've detected a prepared hacker attack. I need your help." There was a pause, then a muffled cough. "I'm sorry, Daniel, but I'm a wreck. Temperature's 39, I can barely speak." The doctor ordered strict bed rest for at least 3 days. I squeezed the phone tighter. "I understand. Feel better. I'll be fine." "What's going on?" Her voice, despite her illness, has become tense. "Looks like someone's prepared an attack for this particular night of the update. I found several Trojans in the core nodes." "Oh my God, are you sure about this?" "Positive. They're programmed to activate after—" I looked at my watch. "In less than an hour." "We need to contact Victor," Emily said, referring to our immediate superior, the head of IT security. "Already trying," I answered, dialing Victor Ramirez's number on the second phone. No answer. Maybe the phone is disconnected. "Try Selena Croft?" Selena was the director of the technology department, and even though we rarely communicated directly, She always seemed like a reasonable person to me. That's a good idea. Feel better, Emily. I'll keep you posted. Be careful, Daniel. I follow protocol. I chuckled. Emily knew me well. The bank's protocols for responding to cyber attacks had been developed by a committee that had never faced an actual attack. They were clunky, slow, and in a critical situation only got in the way. Of course, I lied. Per protocol. Hanging up, I immediately dialed Selena Croft's number. No answer. I then tried several other members of our department, to no avail. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning, so it was no wonder no one was answering. I looked at the monitor screen, which displayed the countdown to the start of the automatic system update. 45 minutes. I had a decision to make. Protocol required me to immediately activate a top-level alarm, which would result in an automatic lockdown of the bank's entire system, including online banking, ATMs, and payment systems. This would have meant enormous financial loss and reputational damage. And if I had been wrong in my threat assessment, the entire responsibility would have fallen on me. But I was confident in my assessment. These Trojans were real, and they were preparing to attack. I was left with only one sensible solution: act on my own. Taking a deep breath, I set to work. Instead of following the cumbersome procedures prescribed by protocol, I used my own tools and methods. I wrote a script that would isolate the detected malware and prevent it from activating, while allowing the scheduled update to proceed. Time flowed away like water. I worked feverishly, moving between screens, monitoring every corner of our system, trying to anticipate where other components of the attack might be hiding. It was like searching for bombs with a ticking timer in a huge building. If you missed even one, the whole thing would blow up. At 3 hours and 15 minutes, the automatic system update began. I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. If any Trojan had escaped my attention, it was about to activate. Screens flashed, showing the progress of the update. 10%, 20, 30. Suddenly I noticed strange activity on one of the servers. One of the Trojans, more deeply hidden than the others, had begun to take effect. I quickly launched my countermeasure, but it was too late. The Trojan had already corrupted some files. No, 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 no! I slammed the table. The damaged files contained transaction data from the last 24 hours. Nothing catastrophic. We could restore them from backups. But the mere fact that the hackers had been able to even partially breach our defenses was alarming. I kept working, tweaking my scripts, closing the gaps in the defenses. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had detected and neutralized 2 more Trojans that were trying to infiltrate the main payment processing system. In the process, I had to temporarily disable several subsystems, resulting in the loss of several more files. But there was no choice. It was like amputating a limb to save a patient from gangrene. By 5 a.m., I was confident that the main threat had been eliminated. The system upgrade had completed, but the condition was far from ideal. The system was running erratically, several modules needed to be restarted, and lost files needed to be restored from backups. I leaned back in my chair, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and truly exhaled for the first time in hours. I had managed to avert a disaster. Yes, there had been some losses, but nothing irreparable. The main thing is that the hackers didn't get access to the main financial systems and customer accounts. It's starting to get light outside the window. The first employees would be arriving soon. I had to explain what had happened, and I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially since I'd acted off the record. I took a sip of cold coffee from the cup next to me. Perhaps I should have called the bank president directly, but I decided to wait for the department heads to arrive and give them a full report on the situation. The sky outside the window was gradually brightening. I began to prepare a detailed report on what had happened, including all the technical details of the attack, the actions I had taken, and the current state of the system. The bank was going to have a tough day, but at least it still had a working system. At 6:30, the first employees started arriving at the office. At 7, I saw Victor Ramirez walking briskly through the open space. I could tell by the look on his face that he already knew about the problems in the system. "Morgan!" he shouted from a distance. "What the hell happened?" I took a deep breath. A new battle was beginning this time, not with hackers, but with bureaucracy. Victor Ramirez stood in front of me, his face red with anger. I tried to explain the situation, but he interrupted me without letting me finish the first sentence. "Do you have any idea how chaotic the system is right now?" His voice echoed through the empty office. "The payment system is malfunctioning. Several modules are down. Data has been lost. What have you done?" "Victor, listen to me." I tried to speak calmly. "Last night I discovered a prepared hacker attack. Trojans were embedded in the main nodes of the system and should have been activated during the update. I tried to contact you and the others." "And you decided to act on your own?" he interrupted. "Without coordination? Without following protocol?" There was no time. The update was supposed to start an hour after I discovered the threat. "I tried to call you, Selena. Even Emily." "Emily's on sick leave," Victor cut him off. "And that's no excuse. You should have followed safety protocol. Activate the highest level alarm immediately and lock down the entire system." I shook my head. "And shut down the entire bank. That would have resulted in a huge financial loss. Besides, I was sure I could neutralize the threat without such drastic measures." "That's not for you to decide, Morgan." Victor slammed his fist on the table. "There are procedures for situations like this, and you have to follow them." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Victor, I understand your outrage, but let's look at the results. Yes, there is damage, but it's minimal and repairable. If I hadn't intervened, the hackers would have accessed the entire system. It wouldn't just be an outage, it would be a disaster." Victor looked at me with obvious disbelief. "Oh, that's your speculation. You can't even prove that there was a real threat. Maybe you damaged the files yourself with your experiments?" His words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt anger rising inside me, but I held it back. "I've prepared a full technical report." I pointed to the monitor where a document was open. "All the details of the attack are here, including the code of the Trojans, their location in the system, and the actions I took. Any competent IT specialist will confirm my findings." Victor cast a quick glance at the screen, but it was obvious he wasn't going to get into the technical details. "Save it for the official investigation," he said coldly. "There will be an emergency management meeting at 8:30. The bank president is demanding an explanation. Be there and prepare to answer for your actions." With those words, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I tried to contact Emily again, but she didn't answer, probably asleep under the influence of her medication. I then called Selena Croft, the director of the technology department. This time she answered almost immediately. "Daniel, what's going on? I just got a call from Victor saying something about a problem with the system. Selena, there was an attempted hacker attack last night." I began to explain the situation, trying to be as accurate and objective as possible. "And you acted on your own?" I could hear surprise in her voice, but not judgment. "Yes. I tried to contact the leadership, but no one answered. I didn't have time to think. The Trojans were due to activate in an hour." Selena was silent for a few seconds. "I see. Did you save the evidence of the attack?" "Of course. The full technical report is ready. I've also saved copies of the malicious code." "I'll do that. Bring it all to the meeting. I'll try to help, but, Victor's already turned half the executive team against you, and the bank president's furious about the glitch in the system." "Thank you, Selena," I said sincerely. "I'll see you at the meeting." Hanging up the phone, I went back to my report, checking every detail. I knew I was in a difficult position. By acting off the record, I had violated corporate rules, but I was also confident that I had saved the bank from a much bigger problem. I spent the remaining time before the meeting restoring corrupt files from backups and stabilizing the system. By 8 o'clock, most of the critical functions were restored, and the bank could begin its business day almost normally. At 8:20, I closed my laptop, gathered all the necessary documents, and headed to the conference room on the 40th floor where the senior management meetings were held. Along the way, I met a few colleagues from the IT department. They looked at me with curiosity and concern, but no one dared to speak. The conference room was almost full when I entered. Sitting around a long table were all the key executives of the bank: Victor Ramirez, Selena Croft, Chief Financial Officer Jonathan Pierce, Director of Operations Maria Gonzalez, and a few others I knew only by sight. At the far end of the table, at the head, sat Robert Fisher, the bank's president, a tall, lean man with graying temples and a cold, penetrating stare. I sat down in the empty seat next to Selena. She gave me a subtle nod, but her face remained impenetrable. At precisely 8:30, Robert Fisher raised his hand, calling for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began in a formal tone, "we are gathered here to discuss a serious incident that occurred this night. Our banking system has been compromised, disrupting a number of critical functions. Mr. Ramirez, please introduce the situation." Victor Ramirez stood up and began his report. From the very first words, it was clear that he was presenting the situation in a favorable light. "Tonight, an employee of our IT department, Daniel Morgan, unauthorizedly interfered with a scheduled system upgrade," he began. "Without following established protocols or obtaining proper authorization, he ran a series of unauthorized programs that caused file corruption and system instability." I felt the blood rush to my face. Victor had deliberately misrepresented the facts, portraying me as an out-of-control hacker inside the bank. "Morgan claims to have discovered some kind of hacker attack," Victor continued with obvious skepticism in his voice. "However, instead of following protocol and immediately activating a top-level alarm, he decided to act on his own, using his own methods and programs not mandated by our security standards." I looked at the others present. Most were listening to Victor with serious faces, nodding occasionally. Selena remained motionless, her gaze fixed on Victor, but her expression didn't betray her thoughts. "As a result of his actions," Victor raised his voice, "important files with transaction data were damaged, several modules of the system were out of order, and the online banking and payment system was interrupted for several hours. We have yet to assess the full extent of the damage, but it is already clear that this was a serious breach of the bank's internal procedures." Robert Fisher listened with a stone face. When Victor finished, the bank president turned his gaze to me. "Mr. Morgan, what do you have to say for yourself?" I stood up, feeling all eyes turned to me. I was prepared for this moment and knew I had to speak clearly and confidently. "Mr. President, distinguished colleagues," I began in a calm voice. "Last night, during a routine system check before a scheduled upgrade, I discovered several Trojan programs embedded in the main nodes of our network. These programs were carefully disguised and were supposed to activate during the upgrade when many defense mechanisms are temporarily disabled. I opened my laptop and displayed the technical details of the Trojans I had discovered on the large screen in the conference room. Here is the code for one of these programs," I pointed to the screen. "As you can see, it was programmed to activate at precisely 3 hours and 15 minutes, exactly when the update started. Its purpose is to access the main payment system and redirect large transactions." I noticed a few of the people present filed forward, studying the code on the screen with interest, but most, including Robert Fisher, looked at me with impenetrable faces. "When I discovered the threat, I immediately tried to contact management," I continued. "I called Victor Ramirez, Selena Croft, Emily Chen, and several others in the department. The only one who answered was Emily, but she was sick and couldn't make it. There was no time to wait. The Trojans were due to activate in an hour. I turned my gaze to Victor. Yes, I was acting outside of protocol, but following protocol in this situation would have meant shutting down the bank for at least 24 hours, which would have resulted in multi-million-dollar losses and reputational damage. Instead, I used my knowledge and experience to neutralize the threat with minimal loss. I turned again to everyone here. In the process of neutralizing the Trojans, I failed to save some files. I was aware of this risk, but I also knew that all of these files could be restored from backups, which I did this morning. By now, most of the bank's systems are operating normally. Robert Fisher interrupted me with a gesture of his hand. Mr. Morgan, you claim to have detected some kind of hacker attack. However, Mr. Ramirez informs me that our security system has not detected any suspicious intrusions. How do you explain that? I was prepared for this question, because this was not a normal attack from the outside. The Trojans were already inside the system, probably introduced weeks or even months ago. They were specifically designed to bypass our standard detection tools. I only found them because of the manual scan I do every week. And you believe that your, unorthodox methods were justified? There was skepticism in the bank president's voice. Absolutely, I replied firmly. If I hadn't intervened, the hackers would have gained access to the main payment system. They could have diverted millions of dollars, accessed customer data, completely paralyzed the bank for weeks. What happened today, a minor interruption and the temporary loss of a few files, was nothing compared to what could have been. Selena Croft raised her hand, asking for the floor. If I may, I'd like to add, I've reviewed Daniel's technical report and I have to say that his analysis seems sound to me. The code he found does indeed have the hallmarks of malware specifically designed to attack banking systems. Victor immediately intervened. With respect, Selena, but you're a CTO, not a security specialist. My team analyzed the system logs and found no signs of external intrusion. That's because there wasn't, I objected. Like I said, the Trojans were pre-installed and activated from the inside. That wouldn't have left the usual intrusion traces in the system logs. Robert Fisher looked increasingly annoyed. Mr. Morgan, you're asking us to believe that you discovered a hacker attack that our automated defenses couldn't detect. And instead of following a protocol designed for just such situations, you decided to go it alone, using unauthorized methods. Is that correct? I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, Mr. President. That is correct. I acted in the best interest of the bank, using my knowledge and experience to avert a serious threat. Had I had more time or had I been able to communicate with management, perhaps I would have acted differently. But in that situation, I made what I thought was the right decision. There was a heavy silence in the room. I saw some of the people present exchanging glances. Selena looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, either respect or regret. Finally, Robert Fisher broke the silence. Mr. Ramirez, do you have anything else to add? Victor slowly rose from his seat. Yes, Mr. President. I would like to point out one important detail that Mr. Morgan is omitting. The time lag between the alleged detection of the threat and the start of the update was about an hour. During that time, Mr. Morgan could have and should have activated the security protocol, which involves temporarily locking down the system until responders arrive. Instead, he chose to act on his own, risking the security of the entire bank. Victor paused, then continued with obvious suspicion in his voice. Moreover, I believe it is necessary to consider the possibility that Mr. Morgan himself may have been involved in this alleged attack. Perhaps he himself introduced these programs in order to then heroically save the bank? Or worse, perhaps his actions were part of a larger plan that simply didn't go as intended. I felt anger boiling up inside. Victor had deliberately misrepresented the facts and was now openly accusing me of colluding with the hackers. But before I could answer, Robert Fisher spoke. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Ramirez. Do you have any proof?" Victor hesitated slightly. "No direct evidence, Mr. President, but the circumstances are highly suspicious. Mr. Morgan refused to follow protocol, used unauthorized programs, caused significant damage to the system, and now he claims to have saved the bank from an attack that no one else can confirm." I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "That's absurd. I've worked at this bank for 8 years. My reputation is impeccable. Why would I participate in a hacker attack on a system I helped create?" "Money," Victor answered simply. "Insiders who cooperate with hackers can get millions." Selena Croft tried to intervene. "Mr. President, I believe Mr. Ramirez's accusations are baseless and inappropriate. Daniel Morgan is one of our top experts. His actions may have violated protocol, but his technical competence is unquestionable." But Robert Fisher seemed to have already made up his mind. He raised his hand, stopping further discussion. "I've heard enough. The facts are these. Mr. Morgan acted off the record, used unauthorized methods, and caused file corruption and system instability. Whether or not he was right about the threat is a matter for further investigation, but his actions were unacceptable and potentially dangerous to the bank." He turned to me. "Mr. Morgan, given the seriousness of the incident and the suspicions raised by Mr. Ramirez, I am compelled to take action. You are suspended with immediate effect. Your access to the bank's systems will be blocked. The security department will conduct a full investigation into this incident." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had expected a reprimand, perhaps even a suspension, but not such a categorical decision. "Mr. President," I began, but he interrupted me with a gesture. "This is not up for discussion, Mr. Morgan. You may gather your personal belongings and leave the building. Security will escort you out." With those words, he nodded to one of the guards standing at the door. I slowly rose from my seat, feeling the stares of everyone present. Selena looked at me with obvious regret, but said nothing. I gathered my papers and laptop and headed for the exit. A security guard was waiting for me at the door, ready to escort me to my workstation and then out of the building. It was the same James who had seen me last night. His eyes read embarrassment and awkwardness. When we left the conference room, Selena Croft caught up with us in the hallway. "Daniel, I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'll try to talk to Robert later when things have calmed down. Maybe he'll reconsider." I shook my head. "Don't, Selena. You saw his face. He's already made up his mind." "But it's not fair. You saved the bank from a serious threat. Maybe," I smiled weakly. "Or maybe I just wishful thinking and damaged the system with my actions. Who knows?" "I know," she said firmly. "I went through your report. The Trojan Code is real. The threat was real." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Selena. But it doesn't matter anymore. The decision had been made." We reached my workplace. I quickly gathered the few personal belongings I had: a picture of my parents, a few books, a mug with the logo of the old university. It all fit into a small box which the guard obligingly offered me. With one last look back at my workstation, I headed for the elevators. Emily still wasn't at work. She was on sick leave. I didn't have time to say goodbye to her in person. On our way out, we passed other IT employees. Some looked sympathetic, others averted their eyes. No one said a word. As we exited the building, James coughed awkwardly. "Mr. Morgan, I need to ask for your ID and keys." I silently handed him a plastic card and a bunch of keys. "Thank you, sir," he said. Good luck to you." I nodded. "Thank you, James. You too." With those words, I walked out of the bank building into the bright sunlight of the April morning. Behind me was the long night that had changed my life. Ahead was the unknown. But I had a plan I had developed long ago, just in case something like this happened. I called it Emergency Protocol, and now it was time to activate it. I got home around 11 in the morning. My apartment greeted me with silence and coolness. The air conditioner was running at minimum power, maintaining a comfortable temperature. I set the box of stuff on the living room table and made my way to the kitchen to pour myself some water. My throat was dry from the strain of the last few hours. Standing at the window with a glass of water, I looked out at the cityscape below. Skyscrapers, cars, people, all moving at their usual pace, unaware of the drama that had just played out in my life. I had worked at First National Bank for 8 years. It was my first serious job out of college. I put my heart, my knowledge, countless hours of overtime into it. And that's how it ended, with me fired on suspicion of collusion with hackers. Bitterness and resentment overwhelmed me. I had saved their system, prevented what could have been a disaster for the bank, and instead of gratitude, I received accusations and a dishonorable discharge. Victor Ramirez. How dare he accuse me of collusion? How could Robert Fisher believe him so easily without even bothering to seriously consider my evidence? But I knew in my heart that this moment would come sooner or later. The corporate world lives by its own laws, and those laws are rarely fair. Protocols and procedures trump common sense and initiative. Hierarchy and obedience are valued over competence and results. This is why I prepared my emergency protocol long ago, just in case the system I had served for so long turned against me. I set the glass on the table and made my way to my home office, a small room filled with computer equipment. There were 3 powerful computers, several monitors, and various devices for testing network security. This was my sanctuary, a place where I could do what I really loved: research and development in computer security. I sat down at my main computer and turned it on. While the system was booting up, I pulled a small external hard drive from a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. It held the program I'd been working on for the past 3 years, my insurance policy against the injustices of the corporate world. Plugging the drive into my computer, I ran a special program protected by several levels of encryption. After entering a series of passwords, the interface of my creation, a program I called simply Algorithm, opened in front of me. Algorithm was the result of my years of experience with bank security systems. It was a sophisticated virus, capable of bypassing almost any defense mechanism in banking systems and redirecting funds according to a predetermined algorithm. But this was no ordinary virus for stealing money. I had created it for a different purpose. I stared at the screen for a long time, pondering the consequences of my actions. What I was about to do was illegal. It could have landed me in jail, but justice demanded payback, not just for me, but for all those whom the corporate machine had crushed with its merciless gears. Taking a deep breath, I began to enter the commands to activate the program. Algorithm was designed to work specifically with the system of the First National Bank. I knew all its weaknesses, all the gaps in its defenses, all the ways to bypass monitoring and auditing. I didn't create this program to steal money for myself. Its purpose was different. Within minutes, the program was activated and began its work. It penetrated the bank system through a series of hidden back doors that I had left behind over the years, not out of malice, but out of an IT professional's habit of always having a back door. These back doors were so well disguised that no one but me would have been able to detect them. The algorithm started its work slowly and carefully so as not to arouse suspicion. It identified the bank's special accounts, those used for internal operations, temporary storage of funds before large transactions, and liquidity management. Billions of dollars passed through these accounts every day, and small deviations in the balance could go unnoticed. The program began redirecting small amounts from these accounts, no more than a few $1,000s per transaction. But the number of transactions grew exponentially. An hour later, the total amount of funds redirected reached $1 million. 3 hours later, $10 million. By evening, 71 million. But this money wasn't going into my personal accounts. Algorithm was distributing it to hundreds of charities across the country: children's hospitals, homeless shelters, veterans assistance centers, education support programs in poor neighborhoods. Each transfer was accompanied by an anonymous message: justice restored. I monitored the program, adjusting its parameters periodically to avoid detection. I knew that sooner or later the bank would notice unusual transactions, but by then the money would have been distributed, and it would be nearly impossible to get it back without a huge scandal that the bank couldn't afford. Around 6 p.m., my phone rang. It was Emily. I hesitated before answering. I wasn't sure I was ready to tell her what I'd done, but she was my friend and she deserved to know the truth. "Daniel?" Her voice still sounded hoarse, but I could hear the concern in it. "I just found out what happened. Is it true? You've been fired?" "Yes," I answered briefly. "This morning." "That's crazy." I spoke to Selena. She told me about the meeting. How could they believe Victor? How could they accuse you of colluding with the hackers? I smiled weakly. "Corporate politics, Emily. Victor had wanted to get rid of me for a long time. I was too independent, too often pointing out flaws in his security system. It was a convenient opportunity." "But you saved the bank. You prevented the attack." "Maybe," I sighed. "But I don't have the evidence to convince Fisher. All he sees is a breach of protocol and corrupted files." There was silence on the phone. Then Emily asked in a quiet voice, "What are you going to do now?" I looked at the computer screen where the algorithm continued to run. "Restore justice." "What does that mean?" There was alarm in her voice. "It's better you don't know, Emily. The less you know, the better for you." "Daniel, you're scaring me. What are you up to?" I hesitated, not knowing how much I could tell her. Emily wasn't just a co-worker. She was a close friend, perhaps the only real friend I'd had in years. But I didn't want to drag her into my actions. "Let's just say," I finally answered, "the bank will soon regret its decision." "Daniel, listen to me." Her voice became serious despite the hoarseness. "Whatever you're planning, stop. It's not worth it. We can find another way out. I can talk to Selena. She can try to influence Fisher." "It's too late, Emily," I interrupted her gently. "The process has been set in motion. And frankly, I don't regret it. They deserve what they get." "Daniel, don't worry," I assured her. "I won't hurt anyone physically, or myself. Just, restore balance. I don't know what you're up to, but please be careful. Don't do anything you can't undo." "Don't worry about me, Emily. Get better. Thanks for calling." I hung up, feeling a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Emily was always on my side, even when no one else was. I hoped she would understand my actions when the truth came out. Returning to the computer, I continued to monitor the algorithm's performance. Everything was going according to plan. Money continued to flow into the charity accounts, and the bank system had yet to show any indication that it had detected any unusual activity. But I knew it was only a matter of time. There were smart people working at the bank. Sooner or later, someone would notice the discrepancies in the balances, and then the panic would set in. I smiled at the thought. Let them panic. Let Victor Ramirez try to explain how his impenetrable security system allowed $71 million to be withdrawn right under his nose. Let Robert Fisher realize what a mistake he made by firing the man who actually understood their system and could protect it. By 9 p.m., Algorithm had completed its work. All the scheduled transactions had been completed. The money had been distributed to the charities in a way that made it as difficult as possible to recover, small amounts to hundreds of different accounts with different routing through different banks. I knew the bank could recover some of the funds, but it would require a huge amount of effort, publicity, and would inevitably lead to a scandal that would damage their reputation. I shut down the program and carefully erased all traces of it from my computer. Then I removed the external hard drive and physically destroyed it, took it apart, demagnetized the platters, smashed the chips. No one will ever find evidence of my involvement in what happened. Having completed these preparations, I sat down on the living room couch and turned on the television. Switching channels, I looked for news, but so far nothing about First National Bank had been reported. That was expected. The bank would do its best to hide the incident from the public, at least at first. Tired of mindlessly changing channels, I turned off the TV and made my way to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator, took out a beer, and sat down at the table. For the first time in many hours, I felt tired. The last 24 hours had been eventful. The discovery of Trojans, a sleepless night of fighting the attack, the morning meeting, the dismissal, the activation of the algorithm. I could barely stay on my feet. Finishing my beer, I made my way to the bedroom and fell on the bed without undressing. Sleep came instantly. I woke up to the ringing of the phone. It was 7 in the morning. Emily's name popped up on the screen. I answered, still sleepy. Yes? Daniel, her voice sounded worried. Have you seen the news? There's panic at the bank. They say there's been a major leakage of funds. $71 million has disappeared from the accounts. I pretended to be surprised. What? How did it happen? Nobody knows, or at least nobody's talking. But everyone's in shock. Victor Ramirez is accusing half the staff of negligence. Selena Croft has been sacked for allegedly failing to ensure proper process control. Selena got fired? It was unexpected. I didn't want innocent people to get hurt. Yeah, this morning. Fisher is furious. He demands to find those responsible within 24 hours. I was silent for a moment, then asked, Emily, you work in it, too. Have you noticed anything unusual in the system? There was a long pause. Then she answered quietly. I saw traces of some program, unusual patterns in the logs, strange temporary files, but I didn't report it. Why didn't you? Because, she sighed, because I guessed whose work it was. I agree with what you did, Daniel. They did you an injustice. They deserved it. I closed my eyes, feeling grateful and relieved. Emily understood. She was on my side. Thank you, Emily. It means a lot to me. Be careful, Daniel. They're looking for someone to blame, and I'm sure Victor suspects you. Let him. He has no proof. He never will. I hope you're right. I should go. Take care of yourself. I hung up the phone and got out of bed. I went to the window and looked out at the city flooded by the morning sun. Somewhere out there, in the First National Bank building, there was panic. Victor Ramirez was running around the office trying to find the culprits. Robert Fisher was yelling at his subordinates, demanding explanations. And $71 million was already working for the benefit of those who really needed help. I smiled at the thought. Justice had been done. I spent the next few days at home watching the news and waiting for the possible repercussions of my actions. Information about the incident at First National Bank leaked to the press, despite the best efforts of the bank's management to cover up what had happened. The news reported a major security failure that led to misuse of funds. The bank's official representative assured the public that the situation was under control and most of the funds had already been returned. This was a lie. I knew that the bank was only able to return a small portion of the money, those amounts that had not yet been used by charitable organizations. Most of the money had already gone to fund relief programs, purchase medical equipment, and repair shelters and schools. Returning this money would have been not only technically difficult, but also reputationally devastating for the bank. Imagine the headlines, First National Bank takes money from children's hospitals. The third day after the incident, Emily called me. Daniel, you wouldn't believe what's going on at the bank. Her voice sounded animated, the hoarseness almost gone. It's chaos. Victor Ramirez has been officially reprimanded by management and demoted. It turns out that he ignored several security alerts that could have helped detect the problem earlier. I grinned. I can't say I feel sorry for him. And that's not all, Emily continued. Robert Fisher personally led the investigation. He brought in outside cybersecurity experts. They've turned the entire system upside down, looking for signs of intrusion. And you know what they found? I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. The very Trojans you warned me about. Turns out you were right. The hackers were indeed planning an attack that night. But thanks to your actions, the main financial system remained intact. If you hadn't intervened, the damage could have been dozens of times greater. I remained silent, digesting the information. So the external experts confirmed the existence of the Trojans. It was unexpected but logical. I had indeed detected and neutralized the malware that night. It wasn't a fiction to justify my actions. So what now? I asked. Did Fisher admit his mistake? Emily snorted. Not exactly. He's not the type to openly admit mistakes, but you should be getting a letter this morning from the bank's legal department. A letter? I'm tense. What kind of letter? I don't know exactly what it says, but I heard that the bank wants to make amends. Maybe they're offering you reinstatement or compensation for wrongful termination. I shook my head, though Emily couldn't see it. I don't think I'll go back, even if they do. I thought so. I could hear the sadness in her voice. You know, I tendered my resignation too. That statement took me by surprise. You're quitting? Why? After everything that's happened, I can't keep working with Victor. Yes, he's been demoted, but he's still in the department, and the atmosphere has become unbearable. Everyone suspects each other. No one trusts anyone. It's not the kind of company I want to build a career in. I understand, I said quietly. And what do you plan to do next? I haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll take a break, get some rest, maybe travel a little, and then I'll look for a new job. With my experience and qualifications, I'll find something decent. I'm sure you will, I said sincerely. You're a great professional, Emily. Thank you, she paused, then added. And you? What are your plans? I wondered. It was a question I'd been asking myself for the past few days. My career in the corporate world was essentially over. Even if First National Bank formally apologized and withdrew the charges, the rumors and suspicions would remain. Everyone in our industry knows everyone. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe I'll start my own cybersecurity consulting firm, or I might go into academia and teach. I have some savings, so I can afford to think about my options for a while. Sounds good, Emily said. Hey, why don't we get together one of these days? Talk in person instead of on the phone? I smiled. I'd love to. Are you feeling better? Almost completely. I think I'll be in great shape by the weekend. Saturday, then? We can have lunch somewhere? It's a deal. I'll text you the place and time. After talking to Emily, I felt strangely relieved. Despite everything that had happened, life went on. And maybe this new chapter of life would be better than the last. Just as Emily had predicted, in the afternoon, I received a letter from the legal department of First National Bank. It contained a formal apology for the misunderstanding and an acknowledgement of my role in preventing the hacker attack. The bank offered me a return to my position with a promotion and a significant salary increase. Alternatively, I could accept compensation equal to 1 year's salary and positive references for future employers. I grinned as I read those lines. Misunderstanding. How elegantly they had sidestepped the fact that they had accused me of colluding with the hackers and shamefully escorted me out of the building under a security escort. And now that outside experts had confirmed I was right, they hoped they could just pay me off and forget about the incident. I put the letter aside. I needed time to decide how to respond to it. Part of me wanted to just ignore it, but that would be unprofessional. I decided to wait until I met with Emily. Her opinion was important to me. The next few days passed in relative calm. I did chores around the house, read books, watched movies, simple pleasures that I never had time for when I worked at the bank. For the first time in years, I had no urgent projects, no deadlines, no late-night system checks. It was unusual but enjoyable. Saturday morning, I received a text from Emily with the address of a small cafe downtown. We agreed to meet at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I put on a simple pair of jeans and a shirt, no more strict dress code for the bank, and went to the meeting. As I approached the cafe, I saw Emily sitting at a table on the outdoor patio. She looked rested and refreshed, no sign of recent illness. When she saw me, she waved and smiled. "Hello, stranger," she said as I sat down at the table. "How's life as an unemployed man?" I smiled back, surprisingly pleasant. For the first time in years, I'm getting enough sleep and not checking my email every 5 minutes. "I can imagine." She took a sip of water from her glass. "I feel strangely relieved, too, even though I'm technically still working. I have 2 weeks off." The waiter came to our table and we ordered salad and fish for Emily, steak for me. When he left, Emily leaned closer. "Did you get the letter from the bank?" I nodded. "Yes, a formal apology and an offer to come back with a promotion. So what did you decide?" I shook my head. "I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to just take the compensation and forget about them forever. But the other part—" I stopped talking, searching for words. "What?" Emily asked softly. "The other part wants to go back to see their faces," I admitted. "Especially Victor's face when he has to work under me." Emily laughed. "Oh yes, that would be a sight. I can imagine him gritting his teeth at every meeting." We both laughed, and the tension I'd been feeling for the past few days began to let go. "And seriously," Emily continued, "what are you planning?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not going back to the bank. That bridge has been burned. I'm thinking about starting my own cybersecurity consulting firm. I have a reputation in the industry. I have connections. It could be a fresh start." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a good plan. Do you need partners for this venture?" I looked at her carefully. "Are you offering your candidacy?" "Maybe," she smiled. "We worked well together at the bank. Why not continue this cooperation in a new format?" I couldn't hold back a smile. "That's a great idea, Emily. I'd love to have you as a partner." "Then, this is the beginning of a new chapter." She raised a glass with water. "Here's to new beginnings." I raised my glass and clinked it with hers. To new beginnings. We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of our future business, what services we could offer, who could be our first clients, how to organize an office and recruit a team. It was an inspiring conversation, full of enthusiasm and plans for the future. When we finished lunch and went outside, the sun was shining brightly and the city seemed full of possibilities. We walked slowly down the sidewalk as we continued to discuss the details of our future venture. "You know," Emily said, stopping by a small park, "I've never asked you this directly, but you were behind the disappearance of 71 million, weren't you?" I looked at her, assessing her expression. There was no judgment in her eyes, just genuine curiosity and perhaps admiration. "What if I did?" I answered cautiously. She smiled. "Then I'll say that it was an elegant way of doing justice, and that the bank deserved it." I neither confirmed nor denied her assumption, but smiled back. "Justice has many forms, Emily. Sometimes it needs a little help." We continued our walk, discussing the details of our future business. There was a new path ahead, new opportunities, new challenges, and I was ready for them. Together with Emily, we could create something meaningful, something that would actually help people, not just make profits for corporations. As we were saying goodbye at the subway entrance, Emily suddenly put her arms around me. "I'm glad we both left the bank," she said quietly. "Sometimes you have to lose something to find something better." I hugged her back, feeling strangely peaceful. "You're right." and I think we've already found that something better. We agreed to meet on Monday to begin formal work on our business plan. As Emily disappeared into the subway, I was left standing on the street, looking at the skyscrapers of the city. Somewhere out there, behind the glass facades, the First National Bank was continuing its work. Victor Ramirez was probably still trying to rebuild his reputation after his demotion. Robert Fisher was undoubtedly busy minimizing the damage from the incident, and I was free. Free of corporate rules, free of meaningless protocols, free of political games, and that freedom was opening up new horizons for me. I pulled out my phone and scribbled a short response to the bank's letter. I politely declined their offer to return, but accepted compensation and asked for positive references. It was a formal gesture of reconciliation, although deep down I knew I would never truly forgive them for the way they had treated me. As I sent the letter, I felt the last thread tying me to the past had been severed. Now I could move forward without looking back. I headed home, mentally sketching out plans for the future. My justice algorithm had served its purpose, not only punishing those who deserved it, but also helping many in need through charitable organizations. Now it was time for a new algorithm, the algorithm of creation. And I was sure that, together with Emily, we would create something special, something that would really help people protect their digital lives, their data, their privacy, something that wouldn't be based on blindly following protocols, but on real expertise and flexible thinking. It was a new chapter in my life, and by the looks of it, it was going to be a great story.